Hey, welcome everyone. Obviously still got a lot of work to do on the floor with our Appropriations Committee process taking a little longer yesterday and having to run into today, but we're committed to transparency on the Senate side, and so when I was told that some members were not prepared on the bills at the end of the agenda last night, I quickly tried to get with the floor leader to change the process this morning to be able to accommodate a thorough discussion, Republicans and Democrats, on the budget. I'm very impressed with the work that the senators, both Republicans and Democrats, have put into this new budget process. While I wasn't there physically a lot, I was in my office watching most of it, and I can tell you the level of engagement is unprecedented. We are committed absolutely to transparency. I saw an op-ed criticizing the Senate for some transparency issue, and that's just not fair. We have given an unprecedented level of transparency and accessibility to our budgeting process, and to have a hiccup on a bill in general government last week that we quickly communicated to the minority party and as publicly as we could shouldn't be a blunder. We had it, but the process we have in appropriations should be applauded because it's going to be unprecedented. It's going to change the way we do governing in Oklahoma for the long term. So open up to any questions people may have. Last week, before I do that, last week I told you all that I hope to have the CARTAG language complete this week. We didn't get all the way to the finish line on the language. We're still trying to reach out to stakeholders to make sure we don't have unintended consequences in some language draft. I saw the language draft last night for the first time. Wanted to make sure that we sent it around to various people before I actually filed it to make sure we don't cause panic. We've reached out to some tribes to make sure it doesn't have any issues there. Reached out to tag agents, Service Oklahoma, used and new dealers, and anyone that we thought needed to have a say in it to make sure that we don't create unintended consequences. So should see that probably, hopefully Monday or Tuesday, and we'll get it off the floor next week. So.
Question on relating to one of your bills, Senate Bill 1477, which cleans up some of the language around the parental choice tax credit. I was wondering if you have spoken with the tax commission and learned whether any of those tax credit funds have gone towards people's delinquent taxes or debt claims. Have they communicated to you how many folks this has affected or how much money this has affected?
No, I don't have any definitive numbers on that. I can tell you when we were going through the proposed rules process, I objected to this being used for back taxes and the like, but I didn't prevail in the rulemaking process. So I've got a bill to fix that. I think the speaker has a bill to fix it as well. We're aware that because of the proposed rule, there's an issue there, and so we want to clarify it and make sure that's not used in the future. But as far as definitive numbers, has anyone actually used it for that purpose, and to what extent, I don't have information on that.
I'm going to ask you about the Senate AP process, and I didn't catch much of it yesterday, so I apologize for that. It ended this morning before lunch and then before work with a voice vote on a bill by Senator Alvord regarding hydrogen. It was a $50 million proposal. It strikes me as interesting it's a voice vote, and there was a lot of confusion. It sounded like it was pretty split, and Chairman Thompson sort of paused and then declared it was a nay. Is there any mechanism by which someone can say we'd like to have it be a roll call vote, or what? It just seems odd that like that idea would die based on an attempted determination of who was louder. Does that make any sense what I'm asking?
I didn't actually see that part. We flip-flopped, you and I, because I watched almost all of yesterday. I didn't watch very much of today because I was in some other negotiations today. But I trust that Chairman Thompson runs a fair committee. I think that if he would have been confused as to who got the majority of somebody just being louder than the other, I think he would have asked for a show of hands or something. He runs that committee with excellence and with transparency, and so I don't have any question on that. I didn't, until you just told me that, know that failed today. That's part of the process. It's not just 3 or 4 of us making decisions. It's a committee. The reason you do a voice vote on some of that is because we want to make sure that members realize that this is the starting point of negotiations. This is the Senate position. Obviously, when we go past week 7, and we release our budget resolution, we'll have a vote on that on the floor. We'll have a roll call on the floor on that. The position will be clear, but the House of Representatives is an important part of the budget process. And so those numbers will be modified somewhat once we go through negotiations, but the public will be, from the Senate perspective, fully informed the entire time.
Is that resolution the next step of the process?
I'm sorry?
It's okay. What's the next step of the budget process? Is it that resolution you were talking about?
So the next step, next Wednesday, that Appropriations Committee will meet and say, this is what we intend on having in the resolution. So those bills that came out today that said subject to the availability of funds, that means that they did not make the cut to make the resolution. If they have a title on and it's going to the floor and we pass it off the floor, we're going to front load the appropriations bills today, Monday, and Tuesday. And so by the time we know Wednesday, we will know if something fails to get a majority vote on the floor, and it will not be included in the resolution. But on Wednesday morning, Appropes will meet again, and they will be presented by staff. Here's what the resolution is going to look like, and we'll have another voice vote in appropriations to approve or disapprove that resolution. Then we'll go to the week 7, Monday or Tuesday of that spring break week, Monday or Tuesday, a week from next Monday, we'll be having that on the floor.
So obviously the process looks a little bit different than years past, but how ahead are you guys at this point or at the next point than you were in years past?
We're way ahead as far as where everyone knows what is going to be the Senate priorities in the budget. Oftentimes, in this process, the incentive heretofore has been to hold the cards as close to the vest so you didn't get leveraged by the House or governor because they knew this was an important priority to you. We prioritize sunshine rather than leverage on this issue, but I think leverage will be given to us because people realize we've gone through a very methodical process to get here. We're way ahead of where we normally are. These type of numbers that you're seeing come out of the Senate, you wouldn't typically see these until mid to late April.
You guys are doing legislation, I think today actually, that carves out some more exemptions for dual appointments. I think there's one for the Ag Commissioner. Do you expect more of those? What's going to be the fallout of the Attorney General's opinion?
So there are exemptions in law, numerous exemptions that already exist in state law for dual office holding, the prohibition on dual office holding. Representative Eccles on the House side amended a Senate vehicle that we're taking up today that would impact both the Ag Secretary and I believe Secretary Winchester as well, since she's on a Russo board. I think that may be what they're hearing right now. But as far as I know, I've not been privy to discussions on my side or in negotiations with the House that we're looking at further modifications. I'm not saying we won't, but right now this is the only ones we're considering.
Okay.
I have a question about your car tag bill. My understanding is that whenever someone takes out a plate, it's going to be, assigned to the car rather than the individual. I know that you mentioned you've been sorting some of the details out with the tribes. Is there a possibility that someone who buys a used car will have someone who's a non-indigenous person will have a native tag transferred to their name?
No. So the original thought and what will be a floor sub, hopefully I hope that I can file it today, but I can't make any guarantees on that, will be the tag will still stay with the individual who sold the car in a private transaction. However, there'll be a much more rapid process to get somebody a plate and still allow them the 2 months to pay. But there's still a lot of details to be worked out. As far as I think the crux of your question, no, the tribal tag will not be transferred to a non-tribal person who buys that car, or vice versa.
What about with vanity plates, personalized plates? Have you thought about kind of?
Yeah, so the tag will still stay with the individual. So the committee bill that you've seen, that would have been an issue had that language stayed that way. That was a starting point in negotiation to get setting down with the dealers on both sides, because they're the ones that requested the change that happened a few years ago. I wanted to make sure we got them on board, and got their attention by filing a bill that was going to do that, and they've been, I say that facetiously somewhat, because they've actually been willing partners to talk about fixing this the whole time. They've actually been really good to work with thus far.
There's some discussion about different proposals that regard technology that, comes from China and things of that nature. I think it's state guard or state shield or state armor. There we go.
Yes, yeah.
I think you're a little familiar. I just was curious, where you come down on some of that talk right now. Is there room for conversation? Is it, some of the bigger tech companies would say this is, a non-starter because it would greatly inhibit ability. What is your thoughts?
So I didn't become aware of this until the shell bills and rules were shucked over on the House side and this language went into them. So I did meet with the state armor or whatever you said it was this week for the first time and kind of heard their perspective on things. They've been working heretofore, I guess, only with the speaker and maybe some other House members. I agreed, the speaker sent over his bill request to me, and I did agree to sign on to 2 of those. I don't know how many there are, but how many?
Maybe half a dozen. Something like that.
The 2 that I signed on to, one was on critical infrastructure. We already have a land ownership prohibition, but this would be critical infrastructure, defining some critical infrastructure to make sure that adversarial nations don't get property close to, as I said, critical infrastructure, military bases, dams, that kind of thing. And the other dealt with the pension systems and making sure that they don't invest in adversarial nations. The others, I haven't taken a stance one way or another on.
Can we go back to Senate Bill 1477 just for a second? You mentioned that you had hoped to include those provisions that are included in the bill in the rules process when the exemptions initially passed, but you were unsuccessful. So considering that, do you think you're going to have any trouble getting the bill passed into law?
No, and it's nothing that the Tax Commission did in any nefarious nature. It was just their interpretation of the law we passed. They felt like didn't preclude people having back taxes and the like withheld because of it. So it wasn't like they dreamed up this issue. They just felt that the law didn't adequately address that. So we can fix it in the law. I was just hoping that the rules would take the intent into consideration. That the legislature obviously didn't want those things to happen, but I didn't prevail in the rules making process. But I want to be clear, Tax Commission has done really hard work in an above board manner to try to get those rules in place. I just didn't prevail on those issues.
When are they supposed to, or what's the next step in this thing?
So my bills are eligible for consideration on the floor. We have to get them off by a week from today. And I typically like to have my bills later so other members can get their bills done first. However, I've empowered the floor leader team to tell me when my bills are going to be heard. So I had 4 on the agenda today that I didn't ask for yesterday. And so I'll let Senator McCourtney manage the floor, and I'll make sure my bills get through whenever he puts them on the agenda.
Have you guys settled on how much you're going to spend for one-time money yet?
You know, the one-time money is, real rough numbers, is around $2 billion sitting in GR cash. We want to make sure we leave in the Senate position $1 billion so we could weather any storm above and beyond what's in rainy day, FMAP savings, revenue stabilization funds. So we could spend roughly $1 billion in one-time cash and still be in a good position. But it doesn't mean we have to spend $1 billion. Let's make sure we're good stewards of taxpayer dollars and don't just spend because we have the ability to do it. So we're going to be pretty restrained on that.
So you don't expect to spend a full $1 billion? Is that
I don't expect to.
okay? You got it.
I'm 1 of 48 though, so
Well,
we'll see.
I get that. I get that.
Yeah.
Can you give me more of an idea besides just not $1 billion?
Somewhere between 0 and 1 billion.
I shouldn't have asked.
Yes. No, there's some, there are some infrastructure needs. You know, Vice Chairman Hall and Senator Pugh both had bills dealing with infrastructure needs. One was with higher ed, one was the rest of state government. They've combined those efforts. That's a sizable bill. I think he has 500 million in that right now. I know that Senator Bullard was trying to get $250 million to Water Resources Board. I think they cut that to 125 today. So it'll be a substantial amount of money, but I have not directed Roger Thompson, don't go above 800 million or don't go at 750, any of those type of things. All right.